Hare Krishna dosto. So today's topic is Azure Public IP. So you know very well what is public network. Public network is like the internet communicate by using public IP address. And private network is like your Azure virtual network use private IP address. So going to public IP address enable internet resources to communicate with Azure resources and enable Azure resources to communicate outbound with internet and public-facing Azure services. A public IP address in Azure is dedicated to a specific resources until it is unassigned by a network engineer. So you can understand if we have public IP address, then it is enabled the internet resources to communicate with Azure resources. So there are two types of public IPs. There is dynamic public IP and second one is static public IP. So dynamic before understanding dynamic and static, uh, first of all we need to understand uh, which resources can be associated with public IP. So these are the resources which can be associated with public IP. There is virtual machine network interface. We can say it is the NIC for the virtual machine can be associated with public IP so that virtual machine can access the internet. So, what second one is virtual machine skill set. Third one is public load balancer and virtual network gateway, net gateways, application gateway, Azure firewall, Bastion host, and router server. These are the resources which can be associated with public IP. So, I am explaining you the two types of public IP. First is dynamic public IP. As the name you can understand, dynamic public IP means the IP will be changed in the lifespan of Azure resources. So dynamic IP address is allocated when you create or start a VM. The IP address is released when you stop or delete the VM. Okay, so dynamic IP in the case if you don't need the same IP if you are going to stop or delete your VM. Now, static public IP address. Static public IP address means this assigned IP address is not changed over the lifespan of Azure resources. Like you are going to restart your virtual machine and your IP address will not be changed after rebooting or restarting the virtual machine. So it is the explicitly to static. Okay, so there are two types of SKUs. On the basis of SKU, we can create our public IP address. So there are two types, basic SKU and standard SKU. So uh, let me going to the Azure portal. So in Azure portal, let me create public IP. So you will select public IP address. In public IP address, I am going to create public IP address. Okay, so you can understand we while going to create public IP address, there are multiple IP versions. IPv4 we can create, IPv6 we can create, or both. And SKU are standard and basic. Okay, so for example, I am choosing basic IP address. If I am going to choose basic public IP address, you can see regional and global tier is grayed out. Means you can select regional or global services. Means there will be no availability zones. There will be no higher availability of this basic SKU public IP address. So let me type the name of public IP. So in last class we have and we understood that what is the naming convention, and accordingly I am mentioning the name. And now IP address assignment, it is dynamic or static. We can choose dynamic or static in case of basic SKU. If we are choosing standard SKU, there is only static, and ideal timeout is 4 to 30 minutes. And DNS name label, we can assign any DNS name label while the creation of public IP. We need to assign, mention the subscription, we need to mention the resource group and the location. So I am going to create this dynamic basic SKU public IP. So let it be created, and meanwhile I am going to create another public IP address. So let me create this, create public IP address. Now I am going to standard SKU. So you can see here tier is regional or global. I can select any of these. For example, I am selecting regional tier for standard SKU, and here you can see IP address assignment is by default is static, and we cannot select dynamic or static IP address for standard SKU. It means basic SKU only having the options of dynamic or static IP address assignment. For example, I am creating this static public IP address. Okay. Now it will ask what is the routing preference. It may be Microsoft network or it may be internet. As per your customer requirement, we can select what is Microsoft network or internet. And idle timeout, it is 4 minutes by default. DNS name label, we can select any. And likewise, previously, we need to select subscription, we need to select resource group and location. Like I am selecting location of US East. Okay, so if I am going to select East US location, it is showing availability zone, and we can select zone redundant or any of the region if we required. Okay, so right now I am not selecting any of the zone, so I am going to no zone. Previously, you have seen that if I am going to select UK West, it is not showing any availability zone because Microsoft is not providing any availability zone or zone redundant services for this UK West region. Okay, so you can understand that some of the location where availability zone services are not available. So I am going to create. So hopefully you are able to differentiate between basic SKU and standard SKU. So let me go to my resource group. RG demo test, and inside it you can see this public IP address. So you can see here it is the IP. One moment. So public IP address is created now. So likewise, go to resource. You can see this public IP address has been created. Okay. So thanks a lot, all of you guys. Hare Krishna.